On at least 5 separate occasions, the Taliban offered to hand bin Laden over to the United States, but the US declined every single time. Why? Immediately after 9/11, the Taliban condemned the attacks, and why shouldn't have they? They had no role in it outside of giving shelter to Al-Qaeda. There was no evidence that they knew of the attacks before they happened, but that didn't stop them from running interference for Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. President Bush gave very clear demands to the Taliban.
And tonight, the United States of America makes the following demands on the Taliban. Deliver to United States authorities all the leaders of Al-Qaeda who hide in your land. Release all foreign nationals, including American citizens you have unjustly imprisoned. Protect foreign journalists, diplomats, and aid workers in your country. Close immediately and permanently every terrorist training camp in Afghanistan, and hand over every terrorist and every person in their support structure to appropriate authorities. Give the United States full access to terrorist training camps so we can make sure they are no longer operating.
These demands are not open to negotiation or discussion.
The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate.
The Taliban repeatedly insisted that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were innocent, and insisted that they would only turn over bin Laden if the US could prove to them that he was guilty to their arbitrary standard. And then, and only then, if the US could prove it to them, then they'd extradite him to an Islamic country to have a trial under Islamic law, once again keeping him out of the reach of the United States. However, the United States is friendly with a lot of Islamic nations. Turkey is a NATO ally, all of the Gulf states, Egypt, Jordan, and Morocco were all American allies, so surely these countries would have extradited bin Laden to the United States, especially given what the alternative to not doing so was.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
So if the US had accepted this offer, it probably would have prevented a 20-year war and a global manhunt. But truthfully, there's no reason to believe that the offer was anything more than what I would call a Taliban game.
Are you saying you want him dead or alive, sir?
I just remember, all I'm doing is remembering when I was a kid. I remember that they used to put out there in the Old West a wanted poster. It said, wanted dead or alive. All I want, America wants him brought to justice.
You see, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and bin Laden didn't just appear out of thin air on September 11, 2001. Al-Qaeda bombed the World Trade Center in 1993, they bombed US embassies in 1998, and they bombed a US Navy ship named the USS Cole in 2000. Bin Laden was the mastermind, the funder, the instigator of all these attacks. He was wanted and actively hunted by the United States way before 9/11.
Our target was terror. Our mission was clear: to strike at the network of radical groups affiliated with and funded by Osama bin Laden, perhaps the preeminent organizer and financier of international terrorism in the world today.
From 1996 to the summer of 2001, the US made over 30 requests for the Taliban to expel him or extradite him, and every time the Taliban would have some kind of ridiculous reason as to why they couldn't do it. First they said it would violate our rules on hospitality, then they would say that they would put him on house arrest in Kandahar, and that they made a promise not to attack the United States, and that he feels bad for previous incidents. But when the US would say, alright, well you've got him, let us have him, bin Laden would suddenly seem to disappear or escape, and the Taliban would say they didn't know where he was. And the US would say, no, you know exactly where he's at, you know who he talks to, who he meets with, and what he's doing. And the Taliban would then say if they expelled bin Laden, it would make the people of Afghanistan very sad and possibly result in revolution. And as the circus is playing out, bin Laden is still doing terrorism. He's trying to kill the president of Egypt, he's attacking US military installations, and he's attacking hotels in Yemen. At one point, the US asked to visit the terrorist training camps in Afghanistan, and the Taliban was pretty taken back by it, and they agreed, but they kept delaying it until they eventually rescinded the offer. After the 1998 embassy bombings, the US told the Taliban that they could continue this Looney Tune obstruction, but the next time he does something, they're being held just as responsible.
Today, we have struck back. The United States launched an attack this morning on one of the most active terrorist bases in the world. It is located in Afghanistan and operated by groups affiliated with Osama bin Laden, a network not sponsored by any state, but as dangerous as any we face.
The US would launch cruise missile attacks in Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda's training camps in response to the bombings. And it was at that point the Taliban started to feel some kind of pressure for the first time, so they told US officials that he would go on trial. But like the training camp visit, the trial was always 1 week away every time officials asked. They also said if the US could provide evidence that he did the embassy bombings, they would extradite him. So the US did, and the Taliban determined that the eyewitness testimony and satellite phone recordings of bin Laden talking about doing it were insufficient evidence. The same evidence was enough to indict bin Laden in federal courts and sentence 7 of his co-conspirators to life in prison. So when the Taliban offers up bin Laden with all of these conditions after 9/11, the US sees it for what it is, another Taliban game, and they were not going to play this time. It was game over. The Taliban didn't even have bin Laden in custody, so even if the US somehow proves bin Laden is guilty to the willfully blind Taliban this time, then the Taliban would have to go find him, and something tells me it would have taken them a little longer than 10 years. Now, after the fact, we do know that the offer wasn't genuine because Mullah Omar, the Taliban's leader, told Taliban officials, "Osama has helped the jihad in Afghanistan. He was with us in bad days, and I'm not going to give him to anyone." Omar genuinely believed that he could dog and pony show his way out of this like he had since 1996. After 9/11, a grand council of 700 Muslim clerics in Afghanistan met to decide bin Laden's fate, and they issued a fatwa that bin Laden should be asked to leave. Nearly all of the Taliban's senior advisors supported giving up bin Laden to the United States. Even Pakistan came to the Taliban and said the United States is going to take action unless you meet their demands. The US had told Pakistan immediately after the attacks that they were going to cooperate or that they'd be, quote, sent back to the Stone Age. But Omar overruled all of them and told his advisors that there was a less than a 10% chance the US would do anything other than issue threats. Omar was delusional. Everyone else around him knew what was coming, but he was in denial. He was so confident in this conclusion that on October 1st, 2001, he went on the radio to tell the country that Americans don't have the courage to strike Afghanistan.
Good afternoon. On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
The US would begin bombing 6 days later.
15 bombers, including B-2s, on a round trip from an airbase in Missouri, 25 strike aircraft, and Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from warships and submarines in the Arabian Sea.
We are joined in this operation by our staunch friend, Great Britain.
Once the bombing began, the Taliban offered to give up bin Laden on the condition that the US stop its bombing, and that they also still prove that bin Laden is guilty to their impossible standard.
There's no need to discuss innocence or guilt. We know he's guilty. Turn him over. If they want us to stop our military operations, they just got to meet my conditions. And when I said no negotiations, I meant no negotiations.